From the overtly dragged out 169-minute runtime that made people a bit bored by the end, to the endless barrages of action scenes that didn't have much narrative connecting them. Here's why fans are furious with John Wick Chapter 4 for its lack of story. After 3 films of Keanu Reeves throwing himself through glass walls and generally getting beat up, you'd think John Wick director Chad Stahelski would have run out of ways to make the fight scenes feel fresh. But you'd be mistaken. And honestly, the reason why the movie got so hyped up in the first place was because they promised to blow us away with the action sequences like always. But it's interesting how the story was just kinda asked to take a back seat for this one. We already know that in Chapter 4, the man Wick himself tries to finally get away from the organization that runs the criminal underworld, the High Table. He gets pulled back into the action after his wife and dog are killed in the first movie. He also has to deal with Bill Skarsgård's Marquis de Gramont, who wants to take New York for himself. It seems okay up to this point, right? Well, it's not until you go to watch the actual movie that you'll realize the excitement for the story starts and ends here. The thing is, overall, it's a very confusing script, and it seems like the main job of it is to move the action from one side of the world to the other in an instant. I'm also not the only one who thinks 90% of the characters speak in ominous proverbs and metaphors to give the already over-the-top action a little more weight. But let's be honest, no one goes to a John Wick movie to hear Oscar-worthy dialogue and deep conversation. But hey, where's the essence of the story that made us fall in love with Wick's character in the first place so many years ago? Because let me tell you, blowing away your audience with just action scenes isn't enough. As an artist of death, Keanu Reeves is expected to fight hordes of bad guys with his trademark gun-fu style. It says a lot that these stunts still feel fresh 4 movies into the series. Whether it's a fight uphill on the steps of Rue Foyatier in Paris, or a brutal nightclub brawl with Scott Adkins' huge German gangster Killa. Stahelski always tries to make the action better than in the last movie, and John Wick Chapter 4 is no exception. He does this with slick visuals and unique camera shots that make the fight scenes jump right off the screen, like a scene with a dragon's breath shotgun that you have to see to believe. The only mistake Stahelski makes, and it's a big one, is that he spends too much time in the action scenes. This makes them less exciting and shows how unrealistic the John Wick universe has become. For example, the fight scene in the Berlin nightclub starts off well enough. John, Kane, Mr. Nobody, and the new character Killa play a tense card game before fighting in a crowded nightclub that has an indoor waterfall to set the stage for fight scenes like this one. As the story goes on though, Stahelski starts to repeat himself. John kills a bad guy with a gun, then with an axe, then kills more the same way. Yada yada, you know the drill. There's even a scene where the ravers in the nightclub don't react at all to the bloodshed going on around them. That's not really a big problem, considering John Wick lives in a strange world where almost everyone is a hitman waiting to be hired, but it's a far cry from the first John Wick, in which the main character's pain made him an instantly likable protagonist. Even when the actions were crazy, they made sense in the original, and in the more complicated sequels. In Chapter 4, they're just crazy. And while they're definitely impressive, they're also too long and boring to be as effective as they could be. At the end of the movie, when John climbs those 222 steps and is pushed back down to the bottom to start all over again, the effect is more one of frustration than anything else. I mean, do we have to do all that again? During the almost 3-hour runtime of Chapter 4, many people have been asking this question a lot. Think about it. John can only kill someone so many times before it gets boring and repetitive, which is obviously bad for an action movie. Maybe the repetitive sequences and the lack of story wouldn't have been an issue if the movie was a bit shorter, right? But that brings us to another main problem with this movie. And it's the fact that it just goes on for too long. The crazy action scenes will leave the audience's jaws on the floor, but some of the longer fights make the story drag on longer than it needs to. It just needed to be clearer, and not spend so much time with Wick going from place to place, trying to get people to join his side instead of the high table. Fans don't know if it's because of this overly dragged out runtime, but the smooth charm of the series has also lost some of its shine. The first movie was intriguing because we only got a glimpse of the darker underworld, but the story has grown so much that it doesn't feel as special as it should. And the unnecessary long runtime is frustrating because the plot can be explained in a single sentence. That is, Wick is being hunted by his former guild of assassins, and the only way to clear his name is to beat the new leader, Marquis, in a duel. Now, Marquis is played by Bill Skarsgård, whose pouty lips and literal silver spoon in his mouth make him seem like a privileged object of hate. Should be easy enough, if not for the secret details about the world that the writers of this series have decided fans can't get enough of. We have to sit through about an hour of the movie before an ally tells J-Dubs that this get out of execution free card even exists. But he can't officially file his challenge with the Marquis until Lone Wolf Wick pledges his loyalty to one of the guild's officially recognized cells. But he can't do that until he kills a local gangster, the great Scott Adkins. It just goes on and on. Something else on the long list of our issues with the story comes the fact that there's barely any dialogue. Mr. Reeves said a total of 484 words in the first part, which lasted 101 minutes. The fourth movie, though, runs for 169 minutes, which is close to 3 hours. But Wick only says 380 words in it, and about 10% of them are in the movie's trailer, which makes the hero seem almost talkative. Wick says more in that 2.5-minute clip than he does in the first 25 minutes of the movie itself. And it happens in that one scene with co-star Hiroyuki Sanada, who plays Shimazu Koji. Wick says, "You and I left a good life behind a long time ago, my friend. Get this." This is also Reeves' longest line of dialogue. I honestly don't know whether the choice to cut back so much on the dialogue was a conscious choice, or was it just to keep this movie focused more on the action? Because either way, it did leave people a bit confused by the end of the movie. I can't say for sure, but maybe the movie could have benefited from more dialogue, considering it was already hanging on loose ends. And that's all for fans being furious with John Wick Chapter 4 for its lack of story.